All right, so a nice rainy morning to practice forward bends, which are very quieting poses. However, we're going to explore the half forward bend today, which means we're not going to be in our deepest forward bends, but they still are very quieting and spacious when we're doing the half version. So we're going to start, as we always do, just getting a little quieter and centering ourselves, arriving, giving our minds enough time to catch up with our bodies. So today's the 9th. So if you can move into your less preferred cross-legged position and pulling the flesh out from under the sitting bones, kind of diagonally from the sitting bones back towards the outer hips and thighs, and using some support to help you tilt your weight forward onto the sitting bones. Just take some time to try to access the weight of your legs and finding a feeling of descent from the roots of the thighs to the knees. And then adjusting your torso, your shoulders above your hips, your shoulder blades toward the chest, the navel as if it's attached somehow to the spine, so we're not pushing into the abdomen. And then keeping your shoulders back, joining your hands together in front of the heart, and closing your eyes, looking away from your brain, just allowing the contents of the mind to settle. Relaxing the tongue and the floor of the mouth. And just coming into the witness role, which is really where we want to be as we practice yoga. We're not trying to be directors. We don't have any agenda. We're just really trying to observe as objectively as we can. So you can notice many things. You can notice your mental state, your physical state, your pranayamic state, emotional state. Bearing witness, getting as full of a picture as you can as you prepare to start this practice. Maybe some sort of an intention comes in here, which could be about this practice. It could be about your day, your week, your month. It could be for yourself or another. And keeping your chest as it is, bowing towards your heart. Releasing your hands down to your thighs. Lifting your head, letting your eyes gently come open. And welcome. So the theme of this forward bending week is finding the back bends in our forward bends. And in the half forward bends, we do have a very nice back bend in the thoracic spine. The difference between back bends and forward bends is the pelvic tilt. So we tilt the pelvis forward in forward bends. So we're going to start in Baddha Konasana. If you don't have a bolster, you can roll a blanket. If you want a little more of a more extreme pose, you could roll 2 blankets together and make a bigger bolster. If you have an actual bolster, just use that. And then you will need some head support so that you're resting on the back of the head rather than the crown of your head. So I'm just going to use a block, but you can use anything that will give you adequate support. And we're taking the shape of bound angle, but you don't need to strap your legs, but you might need to support your thighs or your hips or your knees, depending on how your groins and hips react when you come into the shape. What we're going to try to do is drape the thoracic spine over that rounded bolster and then make sure the head comes onto the appropriate level of height so that we're, again, on the back of the head rather than moving toward the crown of the head. So you might play with the levels of your block to achieve that desired position for your head. It's fine if your chin is a little bit lower than your forehead. What we don't want is the opposite. We don't want the chin higher than the forehead. And so on another day, maybe in a backbending class, I would have you actively start to tilt the pelvis to kind of eliminate the space between the lumbar and the floor. But because we're in a forward bending week, this is the difference. We want to keep kind of a more extreme arch in the lower back, and we want to maintain the spread of the chest. So you can take your arms overhead when you kind of get that signal that your body is ready for that. You could just kind of lightly interlace your fingers. We don't need to be very active in the arms. I want you to kind of keep your attention on your chest being lifted and spread, but also in that forward pelvic tilt. And this is kind of the general shape and feeling that we're going to be exploring in various forward bends today. So because we have this forward pelvic tilt, we don't want to exploit that. For a lot of us, this is a hypermobile action. It's an action we go into automatically. So you want to kind of control it a little bit, or stabilize it a little bit, I should say. Just imagining you're moving the abdomen toward the lower back. So you're just bringing a little more support to your lower back, but you're not really changing the shape. So one way you can do that is to tap into your transverse abdominal muscles and just imagine you're squeezing your hip bones toward each other. And this brings a little more compactness to the abdomen. It gives more support to the lumbar, the lower back. Let's just take a few more breaths here. Supta Baddha Konasana. You can practice your Sanskrit while you're here. Supta reclining Baddha bound Kona angle asana pose. And so we're going to start to move out of the pose, but we'll take a few moments just letting the knees come together and the feet step wide, just to give the groins and hips a chance to reset. And just holding the shape still in the upper body as you bring the knees together and open the feet. We're going to be transitioning. We'll just kind of invert ourselves. So you'll roll to your side and then you'll be facing your bolster. And we'll take the shape of heart chakra pose, Anatasana. And we'll keep working with the same two ideas that we were just talking about. So the forward pelvic tilt, and then keeping that chest really open, shoulder blades into the front body. So you'll remember this position, we want to have our thigh bones vertical. It's not child's pose where we're sitting back. So have your thigh bones vertical, means hips are on top of the knees. Your feet are as wide as your knees. And then the bolster is there to give you some support. So you can rest your elbows on it. What I like to do is grab my elbows with my hands and rest my head on my arms. But you really just have to kind of Goldilocks it so that it feels right in your body. You just want to have support. All we're trying to do here is feel that forward pelvic tilt and plunging the scapula toward the chest. Gravity will help us. So we're really not having to do a lot of effortful action here. And the more comfortable you can make it, the quieter the brain will be. You'll notice with your exhales that you can just really invite more depth to these actions. And with inhales, imagine there's just a little bit of a tugging out through the crown of your head, just lengthening your spine. Extension and expansion. Extension is the lengthening of the spine, the expansion of the chest, spreading, broadening, the sternum, the collarbones. And again, you might feel that tendency to kind of fall or collapse into the abdomen. So use that same action without changing the pelvic tilt, just bringing a little bit of corseting to the abdominals to give your back some support. Let's just go into 3 more lengthened out exhalations. And I'll just talk at you while you're finishing those. We're going to transition to a back bend, which is going to be supported sphinx. And I want you just to notice how the chest will remain the same, the action of the upper back. The pelvic tilt is going to come into posterior pelvic tilt, which we always use in our back bends. So you're going to start to leave this pose by shifting your weight forward. The bolster will be supporting kind of your abdomen and chest. You can place your elbows on the floor right against the bolster so that you have your elbows in line with your shoulders. And then you're going to just really work into that posterior pelvic tilt. So you'll feel your pubic bone kind of moving into the floor a little bit more. But we're going to keep the action in the chest. So I'm just pairing these 2 poses so you can feel what the difference will be with forward extension versus back bend. It's all about the pelvic tilt changing these poses. So we keep the chest lifted and spread. There really aren't a lot of poses where the chest becomes concave. There's a handful, and they're for specific purposes, but most of our forward extensions have the sternum staying in the forefront of the body, not retreating back. And this is also a nice little relief for all the forward pelvic tilts we're going to do today. So just enjoy a little bit of the posterior pelvic tilt. Try to keep the buttocks flesh soft, the inner thighs lifted, the small toes grounded. Really pushing your upper arms against your bolster so you can move the chest forward. And then you're going to just kind of lighten out of those efforts and begin to find yourself in table pose. Sorry, yes, table pose. We're going to do a downward dog with propping under the heels so that we can really focus on these actions more intently. So we're going to place the blocks, low blocks. They're going to prop just your heels, so not the arches, not the ball mounts, not the toes, just the heels. So you can kind of just put them right behind the feet. And then find your table pose. Curl the toes underneath, and on an exhale, bring yourself up. And you might have to do a little fine tuning to have those heels propped. But again, ball mounds and toes should be on the floor. Your arches are just kind of in the open air and your heels are planted. And so this gives us more of an opportunity to work with the upper body. So you're going to gently bend your knees so that you can help yourself kind of bring these actions into play here. So it's very strong forward pelvic tilt, but don't exploit it. So give your lower back some support with a little bit of the abdominals engaging, kind of squeezing gently toward midline and toward the back body. Also compact your front ribs so they're not blasting out forward toward the floor. You want to kind of squeeze the inner front ribs together, but then find those shoulder blades sinking in toward the front body, just like you did in your heart chakra pose. Taking those shoulder blades toward the chest. There's 5 breaths here. If you need to leave early, we're coming to child's pose. You can leave early, but try to stay as long as you can, holding these ideas, holding these actions, imagining them, visualize them in your mind's eye. We'll go ahead and bring your knees down And we're going to keep working here, but I want you to add a little bit of a piece. So I want you to take your blocks, and they're going to be on the medium height because we're going to prop our hands. We want them high so that we give our shoulder blades a chance to sink deeper. So you're going to have your blocks in your hands medium height, and then everything else is child's pose positioning. So knees are wide, feet are together. You're going to sit back towards your heels. Your arms are extended. And with the elevation of the hands, you have that opportunity to really sink those shoulder blades deeper. Let your head just kind of float between the arms. And some people get angry shoulders here. Usually the cause of angry shoulders is the joints aren't sure what you want them to do. So plunge your long arm bones into your shoulder joints. This requires you to kind of scrub your blocks toward your body without them actually moving. This should help your shoulders if they do feel uncomfortable here. See if you can stay 3 more breaths. And now you're going to bring yourself back to table pose. Move your blocks aside. And you'll come through downward facing dog. See if you can find those same actions again without the supports of the blocks this time. Deep plunging shoulder blades, strong forward pelvic tilt, also the engaged abdominals. Heels maybe higher than their normal setting in another class so that you can support the action of forward extension, different than forward bending. Tiptoeing toward the wrists. And now knees are bent. We're going to ragdoll here for a couple moments. Grab your elbows just to support the weight of the arms coming off the floor. Let your head hang heavily from the spine. And just start to drift from side to side, just very slowly. Let go of the elbows and come up. We're going to have 2 blocks and a blanket. We're going to do a version of Ardha, half Uttanasana, standing forward bend. 2 blocks and a blanket. So the blocks will go in front of you, nice and tall. And then we're going to put a blanket across the thighs, right underneath the hip creases. And the blanket is going to ensure that we maintain a strong forward pelvic tilt. So it gives us that reference of touch that helps us sometimes when imagination falls short. We want to have nice, generous spacing between the feet. So a little bit slightly wider than your hips. Make sure your toes are still aligning in front of your heels. You're going to have to hold the blanket until you fold forward because it won't catch until you do that folding forward. So hold your blanket across your thighs. You're trying to catch the blanket by closing your torso in on your thighs, and eventually you don't have to hold anymore. Your knees will probably remain somewhat bent for this whole Ardha Uttanasana. Put your blocks at whatever height you need them so that you can have your arms like pillars. So they're straight arms. Your shoulders are above your wrists, and you're maintaining strong forward pelvic tilt. That being said, begin to straighten the legs as long as you can maintain the holding of the blanket. That means as long as you can maintain the forward pelvic tilt. Gripping those abdominals lightly to support your back. So we're not just pushing into the abdomen here. And the head stays forward so that you can continue to help the shoulder blades dive deeper toward the chest. You might even think about the flesh of your upper arms rotating from inner arms out. So sometimes I call it a smiling chest. So you smile from the sternum to each armpit. You can think about this like broadening arc from your sternum to your armpits. Just a few more breaths. You might be able to work into a straighter leg. Make sure the feet are balanced, that you're not sitting on the toes or heels, that you're very spread evenly over the feet. Good. And then you're going to go into more of a bent knee position, and you can come up, let your blanket just drop to the floor. And once you're up, come into mountain pose. You can keep your feet as they are. Think about the pelvis now, a neutral tilt. So if it was full of liquid, it's not going to be pouring out the front. It's not going to be pouring out the back. It's flush to the top, level. And then go ahead and release your pose. You can move your blanket aside. We're actually going to use the chair and a blanket. So if you want to, you could fold the blanket and just place it over the chair seat. And so I never want us to hurt ourselves in yoga. That's always my first priority. So I won't have you jump out today because I don't want you to kick the chair leg and hurt your toes. So you're going to step wide with the chair to your right. We're going to come into Ardha Parshvottanasana. One piece of these half forward bends is that it allows us to keep nice length, nice evenness in the sides of the trunk. So that's a real big factor in the Parshvottanasana. You'll feel the spaciousness, the evenness of the torso. So we're going to turn to face the chair, pivoting the right foot so it faces the right end of the mat, pivoting the left foot 60 to 80 degree toe to heel relationship, and maybe stepping a little wider so that you can clear space for your hips. We don't want to feel wobbly. We want to feel stable. So if anything, open the distance between the feet. So the right foot's closer to the right side, the left foot's closer to the left side. And then just take your hands onto your hips and move them like a steering wheel. So one hand moves forward, one hand moves back to get the hips to align and become level. Find your nice straight back leg. The beginning of this pose is interesting because we start from a back bend. So you can just kind of clasp your hands behind your back. Pull your hands towards the floor, and you have a posterior pelvic tilt. So the back bending action of the pelvic tilt, lifting and spreading the chest we will maintain. The pelvic tilt will transition to the opposite direction. So come to the top of an inhale. On an exhale, tilt the pelvis forward, but keep your chest as it is. And then at the last moment, release your hands onto the chair. And you're going to push the chair out so that you have long arms. So some days we do this pose where we have our arms folded under us, resting the head there. Today we're really supporting the half position here. So we're going to keep the arms long, and the arms kind of remind the sides of the trunk to really stay even and long as well. Forward pelvic tilt, but try not to exploit that. So use the abdominals to gently grip and support the lower back. You can lengthen that chair away from you as your body elongates. Keep rolling the outer right hip back to carry the left hip forward. And continue to release the shoulder blades toward the chest. We have the advantage of gravity on the back body here again, so we can use that to support the extension of the thoracic spine. Meanwhile, the legs start to straighten eventually, but you can see we didn't start with the legs. Three more breaths. You can bring yourself forward so that you're facing your chair seat with feet right underneath you. And you might put your forearms down, but again, we're not going to go super deep into a forward bend. but feel free to place the forearms. Don't rest the head. Continue to look slightly forward to keep your shoulder blades moving in. Roll the inner thighs back, which will help your sitting bones spread, which will also help the forward bend feel more spacious. And then go ahead and bring yourself up. You can step your left foot under the chair, step the right foot back. And then bring yourself upright with your hands on your hips. And again, you're gonna just kind of roll the hands like you're moving a wheel. So if one hand moves forward, the other moves back. To help that left hip sit back, help the right hip come forward. And then clasp your hands, interlock your hands behind your back. Posterior pelvic tilt, the back bending action with the pelvic tilt. The lift and spread of the chest. Smiling, grinning chest from sternum to armpits. And then start to lengthen forward, start to transition into forward pelvic tilt. At the last moment, keeping your chest as it is, reach out for the chair. Push that chair as far away from you as you can. Try to visualize the sides of the trunk. So the forward leg side of the torso tends to shorten in this pose. So continue to roll your outer left hip back so that we don't get bunched up between the hip and the armpit on the forward leg side of the trunk. A gentle corseting of the abdominals toward the lower back without changing the pelvic tilt. Continue to keep your chest in the sunlight. Keep your head forward, gaze forward to help the cervical extension, helps the thoracic extension. Legs beginning to elongate. Breath. Attention. Notice if you're spreading your weight evenly over the feet, we tend to tip toward the forward leg side here. So bringing weight to the right edge of your mat to compensate for that. Last big exhale. And then you can inhale and help yourself step both feet underneath you and come back to that Ardha Uttanasana, forearms resting. You might just do bent elbows, depends on your body and your chair. And then you can help yourself come up slowly. And stand yourself up in mountain pose, joining the legs and feet if you can. And as you find the neutral pelvic tilt, the idea of the bowl full of liquid not pouring out either side, really step into your feet, step into your legs, and imagine you're lifting the pelvis, you're lifting the rib cage, you're lifting the skull, you're bringing space to your torso, but without the shoulders climbing, without your eyes rolling away from your cheeks. Just bringing a sense of length to the torso, to the sides of the trunk, to the spine itself. The pelvis, rib cage, skull feeling a little lighter, which requires more effortful feet, legs, the action of the muscles gripping onto the bones, the compaction of the thighs and buttocks. And then releasing all of that and just kind of letting the limbs shake free. We're going to do one more standing pose before we do some seated work. And so we're going to do prasarita padottanasana with the chair, the half version. So we'll have the chair in front of us. And this can be especially nice if you have a wall to work with behind you, but it's not necessary. It's just added support. So you can always practice with a wall directly behind you. It makes the pose a lot quieter because we don't have to worry as much about keeping ourselves upright. It can also help align us without the effort of having to align ourselves. So we're going to start with, as we always do, with the spreading of the feet. Prasarita means spread. Aligning the toes in front of the heels. And then finding as most spacious soles of your feet as you can. So make sure you're not rolling over your small toe. You haven't crushed your big toe ball mounds to your small toe ball mounds. And we want to be even on the heels as best we can. Once you have that, we're going to lengthen forward. And again, you're going to kind of work with the chair far away from you so that you can use your arms to be extensions of the sides of the torso. The head will be free and clear. The head is allowed to kind of pass slowly through the space of the arms, but we're not dunking the head, so try to keep the crown of the head pointing toward your thumbs. Remember, if your shoulders bother you here, oftentimes cramping in the body is just a confusion of the direction of energy. So if that's just your shoulder joints, not sure what you're asking of them. So the action is to scrub those long arm bones into the shoulder joints, which contrastly brings the chest forward. And remember not to fall or collapse into the abdomen. Keep a little bit of support going on, like your abdomen is supportive mesh for the belly, for the back, but without coming out of that very strong forward pelvic tilt. A grinning chest. And slowly you might start to notice your legs elongating, the knees straightening, the legs more fully extended. Stay 5 more breaths here. Thinking about the inner edges of your shoulder blades coiling toward the front body, more so than the outer edges. So that's why it's a coil. We're turning the scapula. The inner scapula goes more forward than the outer scapula. And you're going to begin to come out now. So just use your stomach muscles to help rebuild the spine to a vertical position, sliding the chair back, stepping the feet together. You can heel toe walk your feet in. And just put yourself back in mountain just for a few breaths before we return to the floor, to sitting. And just noticing. And only using the effort you need to stand here. And we'll come into wide legs seated on the floor. We're going to use the chair. I'm just going to bring it kind of to the side so you can see me. And you're going to create a little triangle to sit on, a little corner that has enough height to support your tailbone. So you can play with whatever you're working with to kind of get a nice corner. And we have to be kind of specific about it because we really don't want sitting bones on support, just the tailbone. Create that little perch, and then you're gonna, again, kind of Goldilocks yourself into that perfect position of just tailbone support, you'll feel the sitting bones are free and clear, they're coming onto the floor. And hopefully the effect that we achieve here is kind of tilting the pelvis forward enough that we can sit on the sitting bones. And again, we're going to use a chair, but not to rest the head. So it's just going to help us kind of bring the arms forward in front of us. So before we move forward into the forward extension, make sure your legs are opened wide and that you have adjusted the rotation of your hips. So you have your toes right above your heels. Also try to compact your legs to the floor. The legs are our anchors in this pose. If we don't have strong legs, we don't get very far with the extension of the spine. So really seal the legs to the floor, especially behind the knees, under the ankles. You might have to run your fingers down the backs of your calf muscles if you have fleshier calf muscles. And then from there, you're going to work with the chair, grabbing onto the edges. I have a wood floor, so I'm able to slide, but if you have carpet, you're just going to have to push that chair as far forward as you can. And watch the legs here. Don't literally watch the legs, but sense your legs here. We want to maintain those really anchoring legs. So don't go beyond what your legs can support. And then when you have kind of your edge, your first kind of physical perfect sweet spot, then just let the head start to move into the space between the arms. We're not letting it fully dunk down, but we're aligning the head more closely with the arms. Watch those legs, though. They're going to try to rotate here. So you're going to have to work to keep the alignment of your toes above your heels. Keep squeezing the legs to the floor. You know what to do if the shoulders get uncomfortable. See if you can scrub the grip of your hands on your chair toward your body without the chair actually pulling back toward you. Strong forward pelvic tilt, but a little engagement of the abdominals. Nice spread chest. We're going to stay another half a minute, so keep breathing. And then you're going to use an in-breath. You're going to use your stomach muscles. You're going to help pull your chair back toward you. You're going to come upright. And we're going to position the chair over the right leg. So you might need to lift it up and place it there. So Parshva Upavishta Konasana, which means now the left leg has to work. It has to double up its efforts to be an anchor. It's just solo now, solo anchor, as we drape our upper body over the right leg. So the first thing you want to do is just take your hands to the floor and turn yourself as well as you can to get the chest, the sternum specifically, lining up with the right leg. And already you're feeling that that left leg has to really be recruited to hold you down, to keep you supported. So use that left leg to help turn away from toward the right leg. And then we're going to use that chair again to keep our torso long and keep our chest really in the nice extension. You're going to push that chair forward, lengthening over that right leg. I love these side forward bends because for me, and I have a history of low back issues, most of which occurred before I took up a regular yoga practice. But for me, they really relieve the lower back individually, left and right. So right now I'm feeling a really nice opening, a broadening to my left lower back. And that really does increase when I engage my left leg more intentionally into the floor. So keep using your left leg to help you continue to move the torso over the right leg. You're still having to encourage that strong turning. Keep pushing the chair away as you're beginning to elongate. You want to keep tracking with our edge. We don't want to stagnate. If you have clearance, you're going to bring yourself back to center. You might have to work that out another way if you don't have an easy floor, or if you have things in your way. You'll come back to center, and then you'll come back upright. And then we'll go for left side. The chair will have to be placed over that left leg. And again, take your hands to the floor first to help you turn the torso, anchor into your right leg, be intentional with the right leg. It's harder because we're not looking at it. So it's easier to kind of go off duty with parts of the body we can't see. They're out of sight, out of mind. So bring your mind into that right leg, turn away from it, keep it really anchoring, keep it active, and then maintain as much of this turning as you can as you take the chair, push it forward, and really extend over your left leg. And let that right leg anchoring you be the limiting factor here. We don't want to get farther than the right leg can support, because then things won't work so well. So keep anchoring into the right leg, extending over the left leg, using the arms to keep the sides of the trunk long. About 5 more breaths. Keep moving with the chair if you're able to. Even though you can't see your right leg, you should be able to envision how your toes relate to your heel. Are they still right above it, or have they rotated? Because the hip rotated. Good. And then again, if you can't, you'll just swivel over to center. Otherwise, you can find your way to center another way. And then from there, slowly bring yourself upright. And now we'll join the legs and we'll turn the blanket we're sitting on so that we're just sitting on a straight edge. The sitting bones are just on a straight edge, but you have to customize the height, because again, we're trying to keep the pelvis in a neutral starting position. So that means you have to elevate under the sitting bones sufficiently. Some of us need 2 blankets or just doubling up that 1 blanket. So we're going to work in Janu Shirshasana, and we're going to come back to that idea of using a spacer at the hip crease to sense the pelvic tilt staying maintained. So just have a secondary blanket ready to go. We won't place it just yet. The chairs in front of us, we'll be using it for head support. We're going to start by taking our fingers to the inner right knee. One thing you want to watch here as you drag your heel in toward the upper inner thigh is we don't want the knee to really elevate. So you're really, I call it sneaking under the fence. You're trying to keep your knee low and bring the heel up to the upper inner thigh. My hand is still there, wedged between my calf muscle and my thigh. It's helping me move that flesh. It's helping me get the knee lower and deeper rotation on the hip. So here you might need a prop for your right knee, of course. And we're going to put the blanket now and drape it over the left thigh, right up to that hip crease. And you can play again with height of the blanket so that it works for you. We all have different bodies. What we're trying to do is catch the blanket so we have reference of touch. Okay, so we're going to be folding over the left leg. Sometimes instead of moving my left leg, I just take my right knee farther back, but we're trying to come directly over the left leg here. So again, use your fingertips on the floor to help you turn your torso to face that left leg. And again, the right leg is your anchor. All these poses have anchors. Anchor by lengthening from inner thigh out through inner knee, pressing that right knee down toward the floor. Turn yourself as well as you can, breastbone aligned with left leg. We're going to try to catch that blanket and give ourselves that reference of touch, so make sure it's right where it needs to be. Grab your chair, push it forward, find your starting position. You can keep your eyes looking forward, or they might be angled down. Just don't drop your head completely, because we want to keep the cervical extension really kind of helping feed the thoracic spine extension. So it's beneficial to keep kind of a forward gaze rather than letting the head go, which we sometimes do in deeper forward bends. So keep steering your torso to rotate to the left to keep the alignment. Also keep pushing your chair forward as you lengthen, so that you're developing your pose, you're evolving, you're not in screensaver mode. Your breath and attention are keeping this alive. So is your effort. Keep it all going and flowing. And again, here's one of those nice lower back releases. You might feel a nice broadening or some warm sensation or some other sensation in your right lower back. So you can gently maneuver your hands, because we're in asymmetry here with our legs. I'm doing a little bit of action, I notice, subconsciously actually. I'm pulling a little bit more with my left hand and pushing a little bit more with my right hand to keep the torso turning the way I want it to. A little bit of pulling with the left and pushing with the right. Last 3 breaths. The pelvic tilt stays in the effortful state. The blanket is kind of helping you feel that continuous pressure of your torso against your blanket. And now an inhale, just slide the chair closer, help bring yourself back upright. And take your thigh blanket off. Stand your right knee up and extend your right leg. Just take a moment in Dandasana. Your hands just kind of tented up right alongside the buttocks or hips. Your legs firm. And now we'll draw the left leg in. So remember to keep the knee low. You're rolling the flesh of the inner knee up toward the front thigh. You're dragging the heel in as close to the upper inner thigh as it can go. You might take that knee farther back. And then you're going to drape your blanket over your right thigh, right up to the hip crease. Maybe supporting left knee if your knee is floating in the air, if you feel gripping in the thigh, inner thigh or the hip, you might need support there. And then use your fingertips on the floor to help you turn and rotate the torso to really square with your right leg. Anchor into left leg. So reach out through the inner thigh, out through the inner knee, drive that whole thigh bone down. Remember that descending thigh bone from the root of the thigh to the knee. And then maintain as much of your turn as you can. You're going to grab your chair and lengthen forward. Find your first edge. Remember, we're really trying to tap into evenness and length, the sides of the trunk. Strong, consistent forward pelvic tilt, but a little bit of abdominal engagement. Your head still looking forward slightly, allowing your shoulder blades to sink a little deeper. Maybe a pushing, pulling kind of action with your arms, helping you keep turning so you don't lose your alignment. Full body awareness, tracking with your edge, breath, attention. 5 more breaths. When we do all this work with extension, we are developing so much length in the torso. This pose is called head to knee pose. So with this work we're doing today, you might be a little bit closer to the head to knee relationship. Without all the extension, it might have been a head to thigh pose. So now we're lengthening the torso out. The head is more closely aligning with the knee. And on an in-breath, you'll just help yourself come back to an upright spine, pull the chair back. Take your blanket off your thighs, standing up your left knee, extending your left leg. So before we move into reclining, last few reclining poses, we'll do Paschimottanasana with the chair and with the blanket. So just take care of the sitting bones. If the flesh kind of bunched back up underneath, you want to spread the flesh there. It also helps you spread the sitting bones, which again is a more spacious feeling as a result in the low back. Have that lap blanket right up to the hip creases. If you have a belly roll, join the club, but you'll want that belly roll over the blanket, not under it, because we really want to keep the upper body on top of the blanket, lower body under the blanket, to keep that spaciousness, that feeling. Okay, so we're now set up. Your legs are your anchors, so press them into the floor, flex the feet so your toes are above your heels, minimize gapping behind the knees, the ankles, and really firm your legs to the floor. And then grab the chair edges. Let the action initiate from the pelvic tilt forward. So tip the pelvis forward. Keep sending the chair forward. There might be a stopping point in your body. There will be a stopping point in your body. So honor that. Keep looking forward. Keep your chest smiling. Even though you're looking forward, give your eyes a sense of passivity. You might even close your eyes. Just keep the angle of the head with eyes forward. And you might feel the belly wanting to push into the blanket. Remember, we really benefit from a little bit of action in the abdominals here. So when you take those breaths in, rather than kind of exploding the abdomen forward, maybe just gently gripping those stomach muscles toward the back body, which, as we know, will help the breaths move up the body into the chest. If we make that lower abdominal region, lower diaphragm, a little more compact. And I can honestly say everybody's half forward bend looks really beautiful. And I want to say, without insulting anyone, it looks better than most of our full forward bends, including myself. So these look just very spacious. It looks like you're in an easeful state. Sometimes our full forward bends can feel oppressive and even miserable. And on an in-breath, you'll just help yourself align back to a nice upright torso. Slide the chair back. Okay, I have to minimize what I had planned here. So can everybody raise their hand who has a 8 to 10 foot strap? Okay. I think I saw everybody raise their hand. Can you, everybody lower your hand? Can you raise your hand if you do not have an 8 to 10 foot strap? Oh, okay, so we can do this. Okay, last but not least, we're going to do a supported hand to big toe pose. We're gonna make a giant loop with the strap. So you're gonna make your strap as big as you can with the loop. So that means you're gonna close the loop as close to the end of that tail as you can. If you usually need head support for reclining poses, you'll want to place that thin layer of blanket down for your head. So hand to big toe pose is a forward bend, but this version of it, we're going to bring that idea of the shoulder blades moving in, which is harder to do when we're facing gravity in this direction. So you're going to place your strap around your armpit line. Try not to have any twists, especially around the armpits. That can be pinchy. We don't want that. So keep it in the armpit line. You're gonna have to hold it there as you maneuver into a reclining position. And then we'll take the right foot into the other end of the loop, and hopefully you can have the tail to work with. You can tighten off any slack you have. But keep it in the armpit line. That part's important. It's going to try to slide down. We want to keep it right there so that we have the thoracic extension maintained in this forward bend. So it's going to take a little bit of finagling to get, the props to do what we want them to do. So you should have a taut strap, not a baggy strap. Once you have the perfect resistance between the thoracic and the arch of the right foot, you can simply unfold your arms and palms up, which encourages the chest to lift and spread, which encourages the shoulders to sit down. And you're just gonna feel this. So your leg is extended, and the relationship of maintaining a lift and spread chest as we do some hip flexion, strong action of the forward bends. So we're very well trained to kind of flatten the back against the floor, but again, encourage you to oppose that and try to tip the pelvis forward here just to really feel that work we've been doing all morning being the last hour. So if in essence, you're exaggerating the little gap between your lower back and the floor. You're trying to tip the pelvis forward, which is harder to do when we're against gravity this way. Couple deep breaths. At this point, you might have to tighten the belt if your leg has elongated. And we're going to transition to left side. So you should be able to just kind of take your left leg up, put the foot in the loop. Once the left foot is there, you should be able to slide your right foot out, place the right leg on the floor, adjust the strap if needed. We might need to loosen it again. The leg is feeling not ready for that amount of tension. And as you press your foot into the strap, it supports the thoracic extension. Use that. Lift your sternum. Make the shoulders heavier, palms up. Go ahead and slip your foot out. Take yourself out of your strap and just slide a block under your lower back for a passive bridge pose. So a low block, move the blanket out from under your head. The block, you're going to run horizontally across the sacrum. So just resting in back bending, posterior pelvic tilt, just as a kind of a reset or neutralizing action. Just have your feet wide, your shins pretty vertical. We're not walking the feet in to their closest position. Just use the block to help you tilt the pelvis back to relieve all this forward extension we've been doing. And feel free to start to lift enough that you can come off of your block. And once your hips are down, your sacrum is down, hug the legs in. Massage your sacrum with a little circular action, moving the knees in a circle. Transitioning to the other direction. And feel free to step your feet down and come into your final resting pose, using any support you need to assist your body into a fully surrendered physical state. Try not to have your props touching your hands or feet. Remove your glasses if you wear glasses. All the effort falls away. And I'm going to leave you guys here. I did run over a little bit, so feel free to stay as long as you'd like. And namaste.